I'm Lee Spencer, and I caught up with team owner and former racer Rick Ware. Rick, we're in your neck of the woods here in Southern California. You grew up here. What was it like cutting your teeth on the tracks that, don't even exist anymore?
Oh, it was great. We were able to run Riverside Raceway. My first time as a professional NASCAR race in 1983 at the Warner Hodgson 300, which was the Saturday show before the Cup race. And it was great because I remember going to Riverside both for the Trans Am Series races and the NASCAR races. A lot of the younger guys may or may not even remember that NASCAR used to open up on the West Coast and end on the West Coast, which was really unique. And I remember some of the old timers, they'll remember the Champion Spark Plug Bridge. That was like an iconic place on the back stretch of Riverside. And I remember being out there and seeing, the Petty Superbirds at like 7 years old. And it was just, it's like as a kid, it's like it's life changing. And that's all I've ever wanted to do was, to keep racing. And I was fortunate enough to race in NASCAR and IMSA, open wheel, a lot of different things at Riverside Raceway because they hosted everything there. Was fortunate to go to Ontario, not as a driver because I was too young, but to participate with my dad when he was racing and road racing. And they ran NASCAR there also at the start and the beginning of every year. But just this is where I was born. It's a great place to come back and to visit. Ironically, I think this weekend is our 750th start in the premier majors, the three major series, which is kind of cool. But it's also the track that about wiped me off the face of the earth back in 2000 when things weren't quite as safe. So it's kind of a little bit of mixed emotion. But this is great. It's home. The weather's fantastic, and it's fun to be here.
What were some of your favorite tracks as a kid that you went to when you were growing up out in Southern California? Because this is really a car culture. People don't realize this is as much of a car culture type of environment as it is a racing environment.
Absolutely. I was, back in the, early 70s, California was such a hotbed of all racing, including NASCAR, IndyCar, USAC, Trans Am. I have memories of going to Vels Parnelli Jones and watching Slutter on the dyno for the turbocharged Indy motor, and Parnelli's walking around, and the Viceroy cars, and going to Riverside and seeing tests, and Paul Newman was there, and I remember being in driver meetings with Dan Gurney and George Fulmer, and it was just as a kid, it was just amazing. And I grew up initially drag racing, so I got to go see Jungle Jim Lieberman and Danny Angias when he was a drag racer at Carlsbad and Lions and just all these places. And to have a favorite, I guess I would pick Riverside just because they hosted everything there, the IROC series and Formula One back in the day, and NASCAR was huge there. And but honestly, I got so excited to go to Ascot, and I got to drive my first sprint car and midget there, and I ate it all up. I mean, I remember, like yesterday, the fog coming into Lyons in Orange County, and they couldn't hardly see, and these feel funny cars running, and it was all the same. I remember seeing Mickey Thompson's, 4-engine, 4-wheel drive wild thing that was on display at Riverside. It was just awesome. I just ate it up.
I was going to ask you about Ascot because I had a long talk with J.C. Agajanian when I was at Turkey Night last November, and if you were into dirt, that was really the place to be back in the day.
Absolutely it was, and what was great is that, I had friends that ran sprint cars there, and there was a time there was so much going on. I remember had buddies coming over from Ascot over to the Long Beach Grand Prix, which I ran in open wheel cars, and I also ran it in the Trans Am series, and you're talking about Ascot's, I don't know, 10 or 15, 20 miles away, and then you got these road courses and the drag strips, and there was literally always something going on. And it was just, knowing how California is now and how crowded it is, looking back, it's like it's hard to even imagine having to traverse all that with trucks and trailers and planning, and it makes it tough. But it was an extremely exciting, great place to grow up. Just because at the time it was hot rods, skateboards, and surfing, and it just a combination of all the cool things that this side of the country could do at that time. Now North Carolina is a place to be, I think, if you want to race cars. But it was a cool place to grow up.
So you talk about North Carolina is the place to be, and you're talking about being out here, and certainly this West Coast swing has got to be hard on an owner that might not be as funded as on the other side of the garage. What is the difference between how you look at the West Coast swing and, say, perhaps a Joe Gibbs Racing, a Stewart Haas Racing, a Team Penske looks at this West Coast swing?
Well, it still requires the same amount of planning. Everybody has a little bit different agenda, but the tools that they have, they have haulers that look the same on the outside, but actually carry 4 or 5 cars that they bring in from multiple teams and make runs back and forth. It makes it a lot easier. It's more expensive to do that, but obviously their funding allows them to do that. We have to really sit down and we pencil out the cost of flying people back to get cars ready versus the per diem and the hotel cost per day. Sometimes you trade in dollars, so it's like, we need to be out here working with the cars, but you can't make that decision because you may have a bad weekend and have to send some people back. So we've had to make a little bit of changes here this year. We haven't really tore up much on the West Coast, thankfully. But we really have to plan and look at trying to save dollars here and there, because when this is your only source of income, we're a racing family and a racing team, to save $1,500 here and there every week, well, all of a sudden at the end of the day, it made a major difference. As opposed to the bigger teams have set budgets, and as long as somebody works within that budget, they do it, and typically they do it on what makes everything the easiest versus trying to save that last dollar.
So with the Owners Council and with the RTA, what discussions are going on that in the future might help a guy like you? Because we saw 36 Cup cars on this tour, and you've stuck it out. You've been at every race. What needs to happen so we get back to those 40 car fields when we go to the West Coast?
Well, I think, to run an open car, there's a handful of races that make financial sense if you have a little bit of help to run an open car. It's hard to run an open car at some of these races that are shorter because a lot of the purse is tied, kind of to the mileage of the race. I think some of the things that, NASCAR is talking about, obviously they've talked about a new car, in 2021 potentially, and there's a lot of opinions on that, and there's pros and cons, of course, like anything. They're talking really heavily about the potential of midweek shows, which has been in the press, and as a small team, I think if that makes it better for the television package for NASCAR, it makes it better for the race team owners. I think we need to embrace it. I think as long as we know ahead of time and we can prepare for it, most of the small teams, we're working 7 days a week anyway. So if we got to race Wednesday night, it means we got to be a little bit more prepared if we had to race again on the weekend. But a lot of that does make sense, and I think for to make NASCAR better and be better for the fans, I think we need to embrace it, and I think we need to support NASCAR on that. And there's a lot of things that I do really actually like about that. So,
would a team of your size, would it be helpful to have more weekends off during the year so you can catch up just with the latest and greatest and whatever rule changes NASCAR may have come down the pike?
Well, obviously, anytime you can have weekends off, it's great. If it's weekends off in exchange for not having, dollars come in, we really can't do that. So if it ended up being the same because we're racing on Wednesday instead of the weekend, that would be the same. If we had to do both, we're okay with that. We have to get a certain number of races in. My belief is that there are contracts in place, and there needs to be, so many races per year that everybody has to fit for the next several years. So these people need to get their race weekends. But anytime you can have a couple extra weekends off, it would be nice, just because it's hard to fit in a real life sometimes. And sometimes it's great just to stay at home and do nothing and do crazy things like go to a movie and have a dinner, so it would be helpful. But at the end of the day, we're all about going racing and trying to make this thing better.
Appreciate your time, and good luck this weekend at your home track.
Thank you so much, and it's always great to have a conversation with you.